Welcome to a place where love turns into lies, where marriages unravel not with thunder, but silence. Here, every whispered secret, every stolen glance, every fake apology hides something darker. This isn't just drama. It's betrayal, family, blood, revenge. The husband you trusted, he had a plan. The sister you loved, she held the knife, and you watched them smile, while plotting the fall they never saw coming. Every episode dives deep into the moments that changed everything, the text left open, the silence that screamed, the cameras that caught what hearts couldn't see. These aren't stories of heartbreak, they're stories of power, of justice, of revenge served cold, calculated, and unforgettable. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because once the mask falls, there's no going back. Welcome to the truth. It felt like a dream at first, the kind of love story people envy from afar. He knew exactly what to say and when to say it. Every gesture was gentle, every glance filled with what looked like devotion. There was never a moment of doubt in the beginning, not when he brushed my hair behind my ear while whispering promises of forever. Not when he held my hand in front of my parents and spoke about building a life together. It all felt so real, so warm, so easy to fall into. He played the part of the loving husband with stunning precision. Sunday breakfasts in bed, soft kisses on the forehead, a bouquet of flowers on the days he knew I needed them most. The perfect man, attentive, respectful, patient. Friends called me lucky. Family said I had found gold. But behind every compliment they gave, he stood taller, as if each word of praise confirmed the performance was working. What no one saw was the way he studied me, the way he paid close attention not to my heart, but to my habits. He took interest in where I kept my documents. He asked about my family's assets, our business ties, even how my inheritance was structured, all under the disguise of curiosity, all cloaked in sweet concern. I didn't think much of it at the time. That's what trust does. It softens your judgment. He never asked for money outright. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he talked about dreams, starting his own firm, investing in property, building a future. And I, blinded by love, offered support before he could even ask. I believed in him, in his ambition. I wanted him to succeed. I wanted us to succeed. So I funded his ventures, signed where he needed me to, moved money where he said it made sense. The first time I caught a lie, it was small. He said he had a meeting downtown, but his car's GPS showed he had been somewhere else. When I asked, he smiled, kissed my hand, and said he'd stop to buy something for me. He even pulled out a bracelet to prove it. I didn't ask again. He had already thought 3 steps ahead. But small lies are never isolated. They multiply, and with every carefully crafted excuse, another piece of the truth slipped further away. The late-night calls, the whispered texts, the unfamiliar scent on his shirts, things I noticed but didn't confront. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what he wanted me to believe. That doubt was weakness, and loyalty meant silence. He made me feel crazy for even thinking something was off. He'd hold my face, look deep into my eyes, and ask, "How could you ever doubt me?" And I'd crumble, because when someone knows what you need to hear, they can twist it like a knife. It wasn't love. It was a transaction, one I never agreed to, but paid for anyway. The house we lived in, decorated with laughter and photographs, was never a home to him. It was a trophy. A fortress built with my money, furnished with my taste, but hollow in every corner where his truth should have lived. I started noticing his indifference. He used to rush to the door when I got home. Now he barely looked up from his phone. He used to hold me when I cried. Now he asked what was wrong with me. He used to plan surprises. Now he forgot anniversaries. The shift was slow but brutal, like a sunset that never brings night, just a stretch of dull, endless gray. He didn't just take money. He took energy, confidence, joy. He took the version of love I once believed in and turned it into a performance I was too ashamed to leave. because to leave would be to admit I was wrong, that I had been fooled, that the man I gave everything to never actually existed. Looking back, the signs were there from the start. The way he flinched at questions about his past. The way he never introduced me to his closest friends. The way his eyes wandered at parties when he thought no one was watching. I ignored them all, because when someone is good at pretending, you start pretending too, pretending they love you, pretending you're happy, pretending it's real, but the truth doesn't stay buried, not forever. He should have remembered. People who build love on lies always forget one thing. Lies rot from the inside, and by the time I saw the full picture, it was already falling apart. Family always seemed like the one place where loyalty was unquestioned. The bond forged in childhood, built on late-night whispers, shared secrets, matching dresses, and pinky promises. The kind of connection that feels unbreakable, even when life pulls in different directions. That bond was sacred, untouchable, or so it was believed. She was always around, and it never felt like too much. Her presence was natural, familiar. She laughed the loudest at his jokes, offered to help him when no one asked, showed up uninvited, and still somehow belonged. It didn't feel threatening at first. Why would it? There was no room for suspicion when trust is that deeply rooted. Family doesn't lie. Sisters don't betray, or so the story goes. But something subtle began to shift. It started with how he lit up when she entered the room. A flash in his eyes that wasn't there when he looked at anyone else. A softness in his tone reserved only for her. The glances held longer than they should have. The private jokes that didn't need explaining. It could have been paranoia. That's what the mind says to protect the heart, until the evidence grows too loud to ignore. There were phone calls that ended the moment someone walked in. Conversations that stopped mid-sentence when footsteps approached. Her perfume lingered even when she said she hadn't been over. And then there was the night she asked too many questions about the house, about his business, about what time he got home from work. She acted concerned, but it was the kind of concern that felt rehearsed. Still, silence held firm. No one wants to be the woman who accuses her own sister of betrayal. That kind of thought feels too bitter, too cruel to even entertain. But betrayal doesn't wait for permission. It slithers in slowly, settling itself into dinners, holidays, birthday photos, smiling, hugging, lying. One evening, while folding laundry, a phone buzzed on the counter. He had left it behind without realizing. One message, that's all it took, a name, her name, followed by words no sister should ever write, no husband should ever receive, and no heart should ever have to read. The world didn't shatter in a dramatic collapse. It crumbled quietly, piece by piece. The room stayed the same, the walls didn't move, but something inside snapped, the kind of break that changes the shape of trust forever. And suddenly, all the moments that didn't make sense began to align. Every laugh, every glance, every touch. They weren't harmless. They were rehearsed, repeated, relished. When they both came through the door later that night, smiling like nothing had happened, it took everything not to scream. They hugged like family, asked how the day was, sat at the table like nothing had ever broken. But everything had. The truth sat at the head of the table that night, watching them, studying them, deciding what came next. The hardest part wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the lies. It was the realization that love and blood had both turned into weapons, and both had been used without mercy. Betrayal from a partner is sharp, but betrayal from someone who once braided your hair and cried in your arms. That's a different kind of cruelty, one that sinks into the bones. Pretending became the new normal. Smiles were returned, questions were answered, hugs were given, but everything now had a purpose. Every word was bait. Every moment was a test. Every plan a step closer to the truth becoming their punishment. They thought it would never come out, that secrets whispered in shadows would stay buried, but shadows stretch. And secrets, no matter how carefully kept, always bleed through cracks. No one expects the knife to come from family, and that's exactly why it cuts so deep. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, the kind filled with quiet routines and soft distractions. Dishes in the sink, laundry humming in the background, the sound of rain ticking gently against the window. There was nothing to hint that the moment everything would change was hiding just beneath the surface. His phone sat on the counter, buzzing once, then twice. He was in the shower, music playing unaware. It wasn't the first time messages had come in late, but this time, the screen didn't lock. It stayed lit just long enough. One message, one name, one line that didn't belong in a marriage. It wasn't vulgar, it wasn't explicit, it was worse. It was intimate, familiar, the kind of words someone only uses when they're used to being someone's secret. Fingers hovered above the screen, not scrolling, not snooping, just staring. The message was short, ordinary, laced in everyday affection, but it shattered something that could never be repaired. It was the kind of proof that didn't scream, but whispered something cruel enough to pierce through everything that had been trusted. There was no confrontation, no broken plates, no raised voice, just silence. The air shifted, everything inside slowed down. The house felt colder, heavier, like the walls themselves had been keeping the lie warm, and now that it had been found, the truth had nowhere left to hide. He walked out minutes later, towel around his waist, smiling, talking about dinner, asking how the day was. The voice that once felt like safety now sounded like static. It was strange how a single line of text could turn someone's voice into noise. There was a stillness between them now, not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that tastes like grief. And yet he didn't notice. He kissed a cheek, he reached for a shirt, and all the while he had no idea the fantasy had already collapsed. Sleep that night didn't come, just a loop of memories. The dinners, the soft apologies, the unexplained absences, the way he looked at her, the way she looked at him, how close they sat, the private smiles, the forced innocence. All the puzzle pieces finally fit together, and in the center of it all was the unbearable truth. This wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal layered in cruelty, carefully executed, hidden in plain sight. The worst part wasn't what he did. It was how normal he made everything seem while doing it. He had been smiling, laughing, holding hands, saying all the right things, all while erasing every boundary that should have protected what they had. And she trusted, loved, shared blood, had played along without shame. They had both worn masks so well, and now every loving memory felt stolen. Every kind word suddenly sounded rehearsed. Every kiss turned cold in hindsight. But instead of falling apart, something else began to form. Rage didn't come with fists or screams. It came quietly, with clarity, the kind of rage that watches, waits, collects. It sharpened itself in the silence, taking notes of every word he said after that moment, every lie he told while thinking he was still fooling someone, every glance at his phone, every touch that felt forced. The silence became a weapon, a place where grief transformed into calculation, where sorrow became strategy. No more tears, no more questions, just careful steps, because when someone shows you exactly who they are, you don't need to argue with them. You just need to remember and prepare. He slept peacefully that night, as if he hadn't broken something sacred, as if his secrets were still safe. But truth doesn't sleep. It lingers. It waits for its moment, and when it finally speaks, it doesn't whisper, it roars. He didn't even realize he'd already lost. The apology came wrapped in fake regret, smoothed over with soft words and lowered eyes. He called it a mistake, swore it was temporary, claimed it didn't mean anything, the kind of script only a man caught red, handed, could deliver with such unearned confidence. And still, he waited for forgiveness, expecting it like it was his right. She stood behind him, the one who should have been the hardest to forgive, but somehow smiled through it all like it was just a slip of emotion, not a war declared in secret. They both stood there, looking expectant, almost smug, as if the storm had passed and the sky was clear again. So the smile was given, not because they deserved it, but because it was the only way to win. Forgiveness became the mask worn to make them believe it was over, that the hurt had been buried, that the wounds had scabbed over, but the truth was never going to be buried, it was going to be sharpened. The days that followed were calm, too calm. He would wrap his arms around her waist, whisper promises in her ear, cook breakfast like a man reborn. And she would show up unannounced, laughing at old stories, helping with chores, leaving little traces of herself everywhere, as if reclaiming her place in the picture she helped destroy. The house was filled with echoes, not of love, but of lies replaying themselves in plain sight. They thought they were being watched by forgiveness, but what they never realized was that they were being studied. Forgiveness, when faked well, becomes the perfect disguise. It softens the edges, makes people relax, lets them drop their guard, and they dropped it. Completely, they stopped hiding. He left his phone out again. She spoke more freely. They smiled with ease, confident they'd been absolved. But every moment was a step forward in the plan, the kind of plan that doesn't rely on rage or revenge that lashes out too soon. No, this one required precision, time, documentation, patterns, dates. Faces, proof. The game became about patience, about acting just broken enough to be believable, but not bitter enough to draw suspicion. There were moments when the rage almost broke through, when the urge to scream, to confront, to expose, pulsed so loudly it hurt. But it was swallowed down, controlled, because real revenge doesn't yell, it waits. He made love like a man trying to reclaim something. She laughed like someone who had already gotten away with it, and all the while the walls of the house were closing in. Quietly, inch by inch, there were folders now, screenshots, copies, financial statements, recorded conversations, footsteps retraced, friends questioned, gaps filled. Every lie they told slowly unraveled under the weight of their own carelessness. But it wasn't about confronting them anymore. That would have been too easy, too small. This wasn't about catching them. This was about destroying the foundation they built their lie on, and that meant letting them believe everything was still intact. She invited them over for dinner, set the table, cooked his favorite meal, wore the dress he used to love, played music they used to dance to, and as they laughed and drank and smiled at each other across the table, they never once realized the noose was already tightening. Because the greatest power is in watching someone walk freely, unaware their freedom is borrowed. He leaned in that night, kissed her temple, and whispered, "Thank you for forgiving me." And she smiled, leaned closer, and said, "You're welcome." He never saw the storm in her eyes. The moment he believed he was forgiven, he stopped hiding. That's the thing about liars. They're only careful when they feel watched. The second they feel safe, they go back to who they truly are. He became sloppy, comfortable, predictable. And that's exactly what was needed. The decision wasn't made out of paranoia. It was made out of clarity. Cameras weren't placed to catch them. It was already known what they were doing. It wasn't about discovering truth. It was about documenting it, capturing it, letting them build their own cage, frame by frame. The first device went in the living room, tucked behind books. The second near the hallway, angled just right. Another in the office where whispers often ended, and one more near the back entrance where shadows had been seen slipping in when they thought no one was home. Each one quiet, unassuming, never blinking. They weren't placed with malice. They were placed with purpose, because betrayal isn't just about feelings. It's about facts, and facts have a way of cutting deeper than emotions ever could. It started slow. A kiss stolen near the kitchen sink, a hand brushed too intimately in the hallway, words spoken in hushed tones but captured clearly, pet names, promises, plans. He told her she made him feel alive. She told him he deserved better. And they both smiled like they weren't standing on stolen ground. Every day they believed they were clever. Every day they made themselves easier to catch. They used the house like it was theirs, touched things they didn't own, spoke in corners they thought were private. But the house had turned on them. Every wall now whispered back. It wasn't just about their affair. It was about how they laughed at the pain they caused, how they mocked the silence that followed discovery, how they celebrated their betrayal like it was some kind of twisted victory. That was what made the footage burn the most, not the physical touch, but the casual cruelty in their words. He said, "She's still playing house, poor thing." She replied, "Let her. The longer she believes, the easier it gets for us." And that was when the footage became more than evidence. It became fuel. No confrontation came, just more smiles, more kindness, more pretending, because timing matters when truth is the weapon. When enough was collected, dates, times, voices, moments, the plan moved forward. A lawyer was contacted, every file encrypted, every clip stored in multiple drives. Nothing left to chance, everything in place. Then came the perfect setup. A family gathering, laughter, drinks, toasts. They both showed up, hand in hand, acting like nothing had happened. Sitting across the room, she watched them, smiling, calm, steady, and then it happened. A screen lit up. A single video played on the living room TV. No one understood at first, but the voices were unmistakable, the date, the time, the words. Laughter turned into silence, jaws clenched, faces dropped, and still she didn't speak. She just watched them unravel. He stood frozen. She gasped. The room spun around them, but they couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't deny, because the truth was no longer hidden. It was playing on every screen. They walked around like they were untouchable. Like betrayal was a game, and the people they hurt were nothing more than pieces on a board they controlled. Every glance they shared behind someone's back, every lie they told with straight faces, they believed they were clever, smarter, superior, that no one could see the truth because they were too careful, too charming, too convincing. But silence is never weakness, it's preparation. They thought the story was theirs to write, that love could be twisted into power, and family could be discarded for pleasure. They believed they could ruin a home and still sleep peacefully, eat at the same tables, laugh in the same rooms, wear their guilt like perfume, visible only to those with a sharp enough nose. And they underestimated just how much a wounded heart could remember. Everything they thought they buried had been unearthed, quietly, strategically, the footage, the documents, the forged signatures, the withdrawals, the late night rendezvous, every careless whisper, every smirk shared when they thought no one was watching. It was all there, timed, labeled, undeniable. She sat in the lawyer's office the week before their fall, watching every clip play, every page turn, every number align. It wasn't just a case of infidelity anymore. It was theft, fraud, conspiracy, and the betrayal that bled from it wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. They had built their little secret kingdom on stolen soil, and now the foundation was being pulled from beneath their feet. The day it all fell apart started like any other: morning coffee, polished lies, smiling faces. But what they didn't know was that the final blow was already in motion. The first strike came from the bank, accounts frozen. The second from the lawyer, divorce papers delivered in front of his coworkers. The third was the public release, emails, messages, video footage sent directly to family, friends, and clients. The truth wasn't just exposed, it was amplified. She made sure they found out all at once. No one was spared the reality of who he was, who they were. The sister's face dropped when she opened her inbox and saw her own words staring back. His voice played through phone speakers in boardrooms, calling her by a name he used to say belonged only to his wife. And the man who always thought he had control stood paralyzed in the storm he created. His reputation shattered, her image unrecoverable. What they had tried so hard to protect in secret was now scorched in the open. People stopped returning calls, clients walked away, family closed their doors. And when they finally looked around for a place to hide, there was nothing left but ashes. But the fall wasn't just about destruction. It was about justice. The money he tried to siphon back into her name. The assets she had protected behind his back now pulled out from beneath him. The house gone, the business exposed. Every lie came with a cost, and now the debt had come due. He tried to talk his way out of it. Apologies, excuses, tears, but none of it mattered anymore, because there's a moment when a heart finally stops breaking and starts rebuilding, when silence turns into resolve and forgiveness turns into closure. The sister vanished from the picture first, humiliated, disgraced. He stayed longer, thinking maybe he could fix it, salvage something. But the silence that followed wasn't the kind that offered peace. It was the kind that let him feel everything he tried to ignore, alone, unmasked, defeated, and by the time he finally looked back, hoping to rewrite the ending, he realized the story had already been published. There was no space left for him in it, and just like that, the mask cracked. They thought they'd get away with it. They thought silence meant weakness, but now the lies are exposed, the games are over, and the fall is complete. If this story gripped you, broke you, or made your heart race, click like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next betrayal, the next twist, the next moment when truth wins, because here, revenge doesn't shout, it watches, it waits, and then it strikes. See you in the next story.